Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit. I'm here to ask and answer one simple question. WTF is Galacide. This is by a studio called Puny Human, which is perhaps the best name for a developer ever. And these are the guys that brought you a title called Blade Symphony, which unfortunately did not take off perhaps as much as people thought it would, and now bring you a side-scrolling shmup called Galacide. Now, hang on a minute. I know what you might be thinking. Another side-scrolling shmup. Yay, because, you know, PC isn't inundated with those. You have a point. However, it's not just a regular, ordinary side-scrolling shmup. It is, in fact, a combination of a side-scrolling shmup. And I suppose some people would call it Match 3, but that's not really true. It's actually more like Bubble Bobble. You'll see what I mean in a minute. Let's jump to the options menu. There's not much to talk about here, since again it is a side-scrolling shmup. Display modes available, full screen, borderless, and windowed. Always nice to see. Full resolution options also available here as well. Can't imagine playing it at 640 by 480, but hey, if you want a challenge. Advanced graphics options. Shiny enough. You know, there's not really anything obvious that's missing from this, because ultimately, what do you want from a graphics options menu in a 2D side-scroller? You know, that's a big question. And then you've got the resolution scale here, so you can actually get the internal renderer a little bit lower, get a bit of performance if you need it, and then upscale if you so desire. Not much missing here as far as I can tell, although what would, I think, be nice, considering that this game heavily relies on color, is some kind of color-blind, color-deficient option, which the game does not have at all, from what I can tell. It's a bit unfortunate. Usually when you have a game that's heavily reliant on color, as this one would be, you would want something like that. Usually good. Alright, controls. You can fully rebind to keyboard and gamepad only. You cannot use mouse for this, so I know some people like to play shmups with a mouse. Can't do it. This is what happens when you try and rebind shoot to the left mouse button. Nothing. It's an invalid key. And there's no mouse control in the menus either, so that might be something they want to patch in if possible. Otherwise, it's pretty much got, I think, what you would expect. So, let's jump into it and show you exactly how the mechanics work here. I wouldn't really call this a melding of two different genres, because I don't think Match 3 is necessarily a genre. Match 3 is a mechanic that's used in different genres, usually to replace certain gameplay elements. I'm going to jump in on normal difficulty, then I'll show you expert, and I'll get murdered in about 5 seconds. Now, I've got 2 ships available here. You can unlock up to 4, as you can see up to the top there. Your mining ship is your starting ship. I also got the freighter. They have different stats and different abilities. And you can actually go up to 4-player local co-op here, as you can see. No online, I am afraid, which is a little bit of a shame, as I certainly would happily play this with other people, because I am inherently terrible at games like this. Alright, so, looks like a regular run-of-the-mill shmup, right? Nothing out of the ordinary here. Somewhat uninspired, one might say. Well, yes, until you see these. So, you're going to notice colored blocks on the board. Quite a lot of them, in fact. And you're going to attempt to match 4 of them up by collecting this colored scrap, which drops from enemies around the level, and then connecting them together in a logical fashion. So, like that, there we go. We can suck this one in, grab 4, and there you go. So, you're going to be avoiding fire from enemies, and you're also going to be doing this whole bubble bobble Match 3, or in this case, Match 4 style of gameplay, which can get very, very hectic, very, very fast, especially at the higher difficulty levels, which I don't think should really surprise too many people, but it can get pretty brutal, actually, very, very fast, and the general aim is not to get hit too many times and not to be driven off the side of the screen by being blocked off by these mazes, these nasty mazes of colored blocks which have to be matched together here. Now, in the mining ship, I can also suck in scrap, like that, which means I can get it a little bit quicker, although I do have to time it right in order to get the right kind of scrap. If I get the wrong color, then that's not going to be really doing me too much good, and thankfully, while you're shooting, it doesn't collect scrap, which is a deliberate thing. It's deliberately there to make sure you actually have a chance not to pick up the incorrect scrap. Now, you can discard scrap if you wish by hitting the C button, but it is a little bit more convenient, at least in my opinion, not to collect the wrong scrap in the first place. Now, you want to try and combo together to get maximum score, and of course, you will also want to try and do it to keep your weapon score high so that you have more powerful weapons to beat the enemies with. Now, you might have noticed I was also able to change the color of one of these blocks. You can do that. If you grab one of these, you go right up to a block and then you release, then what happens, as you probably noticed, is it will actually convert the block into a different colored block, which is a decent way of doing things. If you can't work out another way to get through, that was a dismal failure. If you can't work out another way to get through, then morphing blocks into different colored blocks can be a way of escaping. Outside of that, that's pretty much all the game offers. You'll get the occasional boss fight towards the end and a little bit of threadbare story, which doesn't really have a great deal of value. And then you'll be asked to play through these various levels. So, the first kind of complaint that I've got about it is not necessarily about the mechanics, it's actually about the pacing. To me, each of these levels seems maybe twice as long as it needs to be. Maybe it's the speed that I'm playing it at. Because, of course, if you play it at a higher difficulty level, the levels will scroll through a lot faster. But I think this is probably the difficulty level a lot of people are going to play it on, at least initially. And as a result, I'm noticing that levels can take anywhere between like 10 to 20 minutes each, and I really think that most of the time they should probably last about half of that. It's usually because the levels don't really vary all that much. They're usually these giant fields of colored blocks that can take several minutes at a time to progress through, and there's not really a lot else going on other than matching the right colors over and over again and sort of shooting away. Now, this level's a little bit trickier than the previous levels that I've been on, but for the most part, at least on normal difficulty, I've been able to almost completely ignore the enemies and the fire coming my way, because I've got enough health to deal with it, and then just sort of fire away randomly in order to get them to drop the different colors of scrap. Now, eventually, you'll get out of these big fields, and you'll move on to the next field, and go on and on until you hit in a boss fight or a little story section, and then that'll be the end of the level. You might get some sort of unlock, and then you will move on to the next one. So, to me, the pacing is an issue because there's not enough going on in each level to hold my interest for as long as it's demanding it. What I would need to see, I think, is either shorter levels or a certain degree of change, introducing new mechanics throughout the levels. They basically don't do that. Every now and again, you'll occasionally get a new enemy type, but for the most part, you are probably not paying too much attention to that. I'd like to see maybe they'll introduce another color, or maybe the colors start to rotate or something along those lines. But they don't really do that. And there's also a fairly lackluster selection of power-ups and pickups as well. There's really only 3 of them as far as I can tell, so you don't really have a lot of variety there either. And the game survives really on the basis of its core gameplay mechanic, which is the matching in combination with the shooting, which is in many cases outside of the boss fights more of a side activity than anything else. It's sort of a distraction, you know, it's the way, it's the way that you end up getting the scrap which you're going to be using. Which is fine in and of itself, but again, shorter levels, a little bit more variety there, or introducing more mechanics as you go through the level just to keep things going. There's a great deal of just mindlessly shooting away, at least on the lower difficulty, and then matching 4 in order to progress, and that is sort of all the game is. Now, that's not to say that those mechanics don't work. They do. They're really quite competent in most respects. Although I think many people are going to argue that the game doesn't really do the shooting or the sort of bubble element particularly well, and I'd say it does it well enough. You know, it's not phenomenal, certainly. I will absolutely accept that. You know, there's not much going for it in terms of an actual shmup. If you're looking for a real shmup, there are plenty of incredible examples on PC. This is not one of those examples, but the combination of the two is reasonably compelling, very hectic, and very challenging. I mean, it's certainly brain-melting in many ways, as far as I'm concerned. I know that's the kind of challenge that a lot of people like, and I find myself enjoying it to a reasonable degree. A lot of people are surprised when they say that I like Match 3, because they're like, well, you don't like puzzle games. Yes, but a lot of Match 3 games are less puzzle games and more real-time planning and real-time reaction speed. So they're called puzzle action for a reason. Yes, there's an element of thought there, but it's more about reacting quickly in a logical way rather than trying to think something through. And I can dig that. That's the sort of thing that I actually enjoy quite a bit, and that is, for the most part, what Galacide is. Now, it's a very, very frantic puzzle action game. But the main problem, I suppose, that I do have with it is that I'm going to die here now. Ouch. The main problem I have with it is that that's kind of all it is. So, I think for some people it is going to get a little bit dull after a while. It does have an endless mode, and it also has, of course, an online leaderboard. So if you're looking to play for the high scores and the combos, then great. I mean, there's plenty of content here. If you're not looking to do that, then you may not have a particularly good time after you realize that each level, at least up to this point anyway, has been extremely samey, and I've done quite a few levels so far. Just going to jump back into this one. I'm going to show you expert level, which is a little bit more hectic on the shooter side of things for the most part, although you will also be dealing with the fact that the game scrolls a lot faster, so you're going to have to be grabbing the right scrap very, very quickly, and it becomes a little bit of a bullet hell at this point. Not as crazy as certain other games within the genre, but it becomes ludicrously hard. Like, really, really difficult. I absolutely cannot handle it. It is making my mind want to escape out of my ears as quickly as humanly possible. But anyway, for what it is, it's pretty competent. I think it's a somewhat limited concept, but it's executed relatively well. That pacing issue is my biggest bugbear with it, and as a result, unless you really, really enjoy the core gameplay loop, you're probably going to get a little bit sick of it after a while, after the novelty wears off, I suppose. And it does wear off relatively quickly, because you're initially very surprised at how this game works, and you look at the screenshots and you might be thinking to yourself, well, how? I mean, how could something like this possibly function? It doesn't make any sense. And then you play it for a couple of minutes and you immediately realize, nah, I'm just gonna die. I mean, that's insane. Look at that. That is absolutely bonkers. How could I possibly? But unfortunately, I've played it for a couple of hours, and I think in a game like this, you expect it to be rapidly introducing new mechanics and challenges every level, and it really doesn't. It occasionally gives you a new enemy type, but that's really about it. You'll sometimes get a block type that is also an enemy, so you have to shoot at that, but that's fairly simplistic for the most part. And I suppose it's a shame that it doesn't have that online multiplayer co-op, because I think that would give it a little bit more longevity. But for a $10 game, which it is, it's a relatively sound concept and it's well executed. You know, it's proven that you can take a shmup, put some bubble rather than puzzle bobble mechanics in there, and it'll work pretty well, and it'll give you a very frantic puzzle action experience. And it is yet another, I suppose, evolution of that mechanic. We see the Match 3 idea used a great deal in a great number of different games and genres, and it's proven to be highly versatile. I think Galacide continues to prove that that is the case, which I think is why I continue to enjoy Match 3 games as much as I do, because I'm just very intrigued to see what they do next with it. So Galacide's alright. You know, not incredible, not going to set the world on fire, but a nice enough concept, well executed, as long as you really dig that core gameplay loop. If you're looking for more than that, certainly within the first few hours of the game, it does not have that, and you are going to find the game to be highly repetitive as a result. Galacide, ladies and gentlemen, available for $10 on Steam or your regional equivalent. My name has been TotalBiscuit. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.